Hey there, good morning everybody, and welcome back to Tropics Talk. Gulf Coast meteorologist Jim Dickey back with you here, looking over a suddenly active Atlantic. We have two named storms in the basin now, Gabrielle and Umberto. The third area we're watching for development chances high with that one likely to become Imelda as we head into the weekend. Gabrielle, let's begin there quickly, tracking away out to the east and northeast. This is racing, 32 miles an hour. It has basically crossed the entire Atlantic now. As we go into the early morning hours tomorrow, it will move over the Azores, still potentially as a hurricane. It's making the transition to a non-tropical low, though, and you see it sort of diving southward, scraping by Portugal and Spain into northern Africa. That would be as a non-tropical entity, but still likely spreading some wind and rain there. Some impacts to Europe from this storm system. Not every year you talk about a tropical system making impacts in Europe and Africa, but that's what we're talking about with Gabrielle as it falls apart over the next couple of days. Let's switch gears to the newly named, at least somewhat newly named, in the last 12 hours, Tropical Storm Umberto. 45 mile per hour sustained winds moving to the north and west at 10 miles per hour. There's Umberto. Looking fairly healthy on the satellite presentation all of a sudden. It has held serve with heavy thunderstorm activity sort of broadly around the center over the last 24 hours or so. Now you're getting that more sort of concentric circle looking pattern to the thunderstorm activity right over the center. So this could already be making a run at intensification. Signs pointed to this would hold off on intensifying, or at least it would be a gradual process over the next couple of days, perhaps a little more quickly than anticipated. I'll be interested to see what the Hurricane Center does with this at the 11 o'clock update. But we're still in the 5 a.m. advisories. There's no active watches or warnings out for Umberto, and so we're only getting the advisories 511, 511. Moving to the north and west, 10 miles per hour, so much more slowly moving system that we're talking about with Gabrielle. This will still move fairly slowly and gradually intensify, at the very least, going through the weekend. The forecast calls for this to be a major hurricane by early next week. And I do think this stays well to the north of the Caribbean, this stays well to the east of the Bahamas, stays well to the east of Florida and the U.S. as we go into next week. But it's one to watch, particularly as we talk about its potential influences on the next developing storm, on what will likely be Imelda by the time we get to the weekend, potentially as early as tomorrow. I see the thunderstorm activity really flaring up with this. I'm not seeing much, organization with it. You can see broadly north of Hispaniola clouds moving from east to west. South of Hispaniola, those very dim clouds showing up on the satellite presentation moving from west to east. So clearly, there's a broad circulation here marking that tropical wave. And this will continue to try to organize itself as it lifts northward. Land interactions with Hispaniola should limit that development here today. But as it moves over the Bahamas, very warm waters here. Conditions appear to be ripe for this to try to develop, in the Hurricane Center, in their latest update, upgraded the formation chances, the development chances, up to 90%. Regardless, this is going to be a big rainmaker. Already is bringing some very heavy rain to the eastern side of Hispaniola, to the Dominican Republic. We'll spread that heavy rain over the Turks and Caicos up on through the Bahamas going into the weekend, and then tracking north from there. Now, at this point, I'm confident this is going to stay well east of southwest Florida. The steering currents through the weekend are pretty clear-cut. Emphasis on through the weekend because things get a little more muddled from there. But there's a dip in the jet stream, an upper level low over the southeastern U.S. High pressure, the Bermuda high, is actually pretty close to Bermuda as we get into early Sunday morning. You see that little swirl there, that's actually Umberto marked on the model. But you can see sort of the corridor, the highway that is laying out for this storm to take, for the storm, where the storm will track. Remember, these storms don't steer themselves. They're steered by these broader pressure systems, these large-scale high and low pressure systems in the atmosphere, and that is the path of least resistance that this storm is likely to take, at least over the next couple of days. So when you look at the model plots, there's very good agreement that both storms will sort of find that weakness between the low, between the high, in the southwestern corner of the Atlantic, east of Florida, west of Bermuda. And from there, certainly more questions than answers right now. So I do think this stays east of Florida. I also think there's a decent chance we could be talking about direct impacts to the U.S. East Coast from Cape Canaveral on northward into the Carolinas going into next week. But note, some of those models quickly jog eastward. I want to take a look at the deterministic run, the operational run of the European forecast model, which shows as we go forward through Friday into early Saturday morning, this is starting to close off its circulation. We have Hurricane Umberto on this model here, well east of it, but sort of twin storms taking similar tracks going forward. Just remarkable to see here. There's Umberto. There's developing Imelda. You have a closed circulation now, so if this were to play out, this would be at least a tropical depression at this point in time, if not verging on tropical storm strength. And then by the time we get to Sunday, we have a tropical storm off to the east of Florida. Now, no, yes, close to the East Coast, but we'd be on the favorable side of the storm system, the preferred side of the storm system, to the west of the center, on the left side, the clean side. You know, so often we've been talking about storms going into the Gulf over the last couple of years. We've been on the eastern side, or the dirty side of storms. Now on the western side of it, the worst of the wind would be off to the east, and we'd be only talking about, even a storm this close to Florida, sort of fringe impacts, occasional gusty winds, certainly some rough seas out there, and maybe some outer rain bands whipping in to the East Coast. Similar outcome on the GFS forecast model. A stronger storm for sure. This would definitely be a tropical storm east of Florida by Sunday evening, but remarkable model agreement in those two operational runs of the model here this morning. But again, that's clear cut. I think through Sunday we have fairly high confidence of where this thing is going to go, that it will likely come together. After that, much less certainty. And speaking to that, take a look at the ensembles of the GFS and European forecast models. Remember, ensembles, you take those parent models, you tweak them a number of different ways, and you run them out concurrently. Each line is a different member of those two various ensembles. In yellow is the European, in green is the American or GFS, and you can see why we call these spaghetti plots, because it looks like you plop down a bunch of spaghetti on top of a plate. From this, it's hard to take just from this view any type of concrete answers as to where this is going to go. But when you dive in a little more closely, I think there are two really scenarios that are most likely to play out here. One where this stays on that northerly course. I'm talking about Imelda, of course, Invest 94L. One where it stays on a northerly course and heads toward the Carolinas. Another scenario where it is pulled out to sea by Umberto. You've probably seen lots of different posts on social media about the Fujiwara effect. I won't dive into that here deeply. We're actually going to have an update on that. Gulf Coast meteorologist Caroline Castora will on the Fujiwara effect coming up on Gulf Coast News ABC at 9 o'clock. But basically, as Umberto moves toward the storm, oftentimes what you see with two competing cyclones is sort of a dance of the two. And if Umberto moves quickly enough to the west, it could wrap up developing Imelda into its circulation and pull it away from the coast. You see some of these lines showing that sharp turn to the east. However, if Imelda develops a little more quickly and moves a little more quickly, or if Umberto is too slow to move westward, you wouldn't get that influence, that interaction between the two. And most models that show that show a storm going toward and potentially into the Carolinas, a potential landfall there. And then on top of all that, if that interaction doesn't occur, high pressure set to build in over top of this into next week, and that could cause this to slow to a crawl, perhaps even stall. So at this point, more questions than answers in the longer range. It's too early to say if there will be direct impacts on the east coast of the U.S., but I would say anybody from Cape Canaveral on northward through the Carolinas, even into the mid-Atlantic, good idea to pay very close attention to the forecast here this weekend, as direct impacts are certainly possible. Make sure you have a plan in place. Make sure those hurricane kits are stocked up. And again, be sure you're checking back for updates, getting the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. We'll keep you updated here on what's going on out there in the tropics, too, at Gulf Coast News. Until next time, I'm Gulf Coast meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a great day.